the gentleman here on my right is Mr. Herb Powers. He's a, I believe the correct term is mastering engineer.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so we will hear a bit about mastering techniques, loudness wars, and how to make things sound better. Please give him a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
So before we get into frequencies and dBs and all those technical things I don't understand, let us talk a little bit about you. How did you get to where you are now? And how did it start for Mr. Powers? You were born and bred in New York City, right?
Yes, I was born and bred in born and raised in Harlem, New York, actually. So been here pretty much all my life. And I always had a love for music, and I'm sure that everyone in the room has a love of music. There's some faces here that I even know, and I know that they do, definitely. I always wanted to hear music wherever I was at, whether I was in stores. And in Harlem at those times, the 45 record was really big. You would leave your house and go to the corner, and there would always be like a record store there, and they would play whatever the hit was of that week. And it always was like a question to me. I wonder how they make them. Where did the records come from? And I didn't think about it too much, but actually I did, because my father was in the business also. He worked for, it wasn't called Sony then, it was called Columbia Records, Red Label. And he was in the studios, and occasionally, very occasionally, he would let us come down, me and my sister. It was a good thing. And you would meet artists, they would be recording, and I wasn't exactly sure if that was the path that I wanted to take, but it seemed like it was going to work out that way. So,
what was he doing there? Was he like a mixing engineer?
No,
or?
his job primarily, he was what they call quality control. I'm not going to say my age, but I'm getting really older. but I've been in the business myself for like over 35 years. But let's just put it this way. In his day, back in the day, everybody, and especially at a company like Sony, everybody had their own job. If someone brought these turntables in, they had a union guy to actually hook up the wires. And because I went there a couple of times, and I was like, oh, let me place the speakers, let me make sure they're in phase and stuff. No, don't touch that. We have a guy for that. So his job was actually quality control of the studio. So any records that came out of the studio, they would take it to his office, and he would actually have to check them through a microscope and listening for any flaws. And if there were any flaws, he could bounce them back and ask them, whoever was the mastering engineer or the recording, to redo it for whatever the reason is. That gets really technical, and I will not bore you because everyone will be going, oh, really quickly. But when I became a mastering engineer, I became one of his biggest clients because I kept screwing up. And he was like, Herb, you know better than this. I was like, my philosophy became a great record is not a safe record. And then I got this name where they called me Herb Pump Powers, and other names some of them I wouldn't want to say. But
But how do you mean a great record is not a safe record?
Well, when you're listening to music, I always feel that, okay, I'll go back to the first story. When I first got into the studios, one of the things I noticed, I was DJing, and I'm not going to say I was a great DJ. I was an okay DJ. But I was doing a lot of DJing in a few clubs, a lot of mobile DJing, and I just always noticed that records themselves, to me, did not sound that good. I thought they sounded okay, but I would always play with the mixer. And I was like, I gotta get a little more bass in this. I want to get a little more this and that. I want to get a little more that. And so as I was listening to him, I said, I want to find out how this is done. So I went to Sigma Sound. That was a studio that was on 54th Street, I think it was, the Ed Sullivan Building. And then I went upstairs, and there was Frankford Wayne. And I realized that's where they make the actual records. You make the actual acetates. And it was true. I realized after being there that there was a lot of technical stuff that could be done a little better. It took a lot of time, and it took a little more energy, but that's basically where I got the idea that, you know what, I really want to get into this business, and I really want to do this and be in the studio and be a mastering guy, because that was the last stage before it hit the street. Now, so you can actually say that the studio work is, of course, super important. You have to record, then you have to mix, and then back then, mastering was important because it was to get the actual vinyl records, which a few of them there out. Of course, it's changed nowadays because, and I'm gonna sound old when I say this, is the CD, which a lot of people don't deal with anymore, and then now there's, you know, the file systems. But mastering is still needed because sound of things from different, say on an album, you might have mixes from, say, 5 different studios with many different producers. Some of you guys might even be producers. And let's say he's a producer and she's a producer, and they're all on the same record. They're going to have different views on how things sound and even where they're done at. So my job would be to kind of congel it so it sounds like one concept. You keep the flavor of each producer, but you still want it to have a certain concept and a certain flow. And that becomes one of the main things of mastering right now.
And before we get to that, is there actually a formal education to become a mastering engineer? Do you have to attend a school back in your days, or how did you?
No. Well,
how did you get into it?
Well, back in my day, no, there was no formal school that I know of. I kind of got into it by just getting coffee and, you know, being the runner. Actually, the interesting thing about it was at Frankford Wayne, it was such a kind of like regular place almost, if you want to call it that. I actually built some rooms. It was like I was in one room, and I started in this room about the size of maybe behind here. Squared, just very small, and it was just a couple of tape machines, and I learned how to edit, and it was editing with a razor blade
instead of a computer mouse.
Oh, no computers. No, there were no computers. I don't even think the Tandy computer had came out yet, and IBMs were still like, if you had that's like when Bill Gates said no one would ever need like over like a gig, back in those days. It reminds me when I bought my first gig back then. It cost me like $1,000 for a gig of space. And I say that, I'm gonna say it again. Back in that day, I bought a gig of space, and I was the man. I had a 17-inch screen, and I had this like crappy IBM computer, and I used to do all sorts of things on it. And a gig of hard drive space was like over $1,000. And I'm gonna get back to that why I say that now, but. Remind me, because sometimes I forget these things. But
I will. But yeah, the razor blade.
Yeah, but
thing,
but anyway, we actually had to cut tape with a razor blade, and I was practicing in the room for a while, and you realize that if you screwed up, you really screwed up someone's master. So you really had to be good at this. And it took a while. It took an actual while to learn how to cut, learn how not to mess up the tape, learn how to what we call overlay the tape, so that you put one piece of the edit, it's marked over top another piece of edit. That way, if you did screw up the edit, at least it was a screwed up piece so they would match. Because if you cut them separately, you might have the angles might be off, and then you'll hear that. I mean, there was many people that I learned through and with, and it was just a great time. It was a great time. We were actually in the studio. An actual session would go a long time, because we would actually sometimes have 10 reels of half-inch tapes or quarter-inch tapes, and back then everyone just kept recording. So it was like, okay, we got hours of music, let's make a 7-minute song. And so, especially some of the bigger DJs, they would do that. And then we would come out with a song at the end of the day, and we'd be like, wow, we did that. You just watch those edits go by. Like,
So you were not only involved in the actual mastering process, but also
well, I
in
was
the
in
edit.
editing. And then from there, I went into a mastering room. Actually went into a mastering room and still wound up editing. It was like they most people wanted you to edit because they got comfortable with you, and so you would keep editing and mastering. And mastering a record then was a very linear thing because when you're cutting the actual vinyl, once you start, you can't stop. So the singles were pretty simple because you would have one EQ for it, maybe. But an album you might have, it would almost be like this EQ1, EQ2, EQ3. So for song 1 you have this one set up. For song 2 you have that one set up. For song 3 you have that one. This is if your place had money. If it didn't, you might just have 1 and 2. And so here's song 1, here's song 2, here's song 3, here's song 4. And as the song faded, you would jump to this one, and then it was almost like a show. We would be standing there, and people would be like, "Oh, look at work," because it was like, "I'm gonna jump to this one, change the levels, go to this one," and we weren't storing it on any tape back then because you didn't do that. You did it real time. So if you messed up, you messed up the side, and
Which cost money again.
it cost money. The owners made us pay for it. Um, the client would look at you like, Herb, I wanted to go on my date and go get drinks and stuff, and you're still doing it. So you try, so you try not to mess up because you wanted to get out, or everyone wanted to go to the club that night and actually spin it. And so you're sitting there just trying to get this side done, and it took a lot of thought. It really did. And that's why people used to call it the voodoo art, because to fit 20 or 24 minutes or even 15 minutes on one disc and get it right, it's an art, and you had to make sure that the disc after the session was done didn't skip.
What's the time limit to a side? I mean, to
Well,
still have it sound good.
Honestly, I would say 20 minutes. So technically, and that's why if you remember, most albums in the old days were 4 songs per side, maybe 5. And the average album was 40 minutes, maybe 42, 44, stuff like that. Then when the CD came out, albums got longer. And in some senses, albums got filled with a lot of filler. Because everyone could, hey, we could throw this on, right? Because we have the space, and it's cool, because it's all, it's all creative stuff. But, back then it was, we really sat there. That's the other thing in the master room. The producers would come, the artists sometimes, and it became a thing of what songs not making this album. Because if you had 25 minutes, 26 minutes, I'm like, it ain't gonna sound good. And when you say that, everyone's like, okay, we'll take a song off, because the level would go low, or you'd have to turn down the bass, because bass takes up the most room on a record. And you were configuring the record for the format. Also, what a lot of people didn't know with the vinyl back then is, as you went in a diameter, like the 3rd, 4th song, you lost top end. So as it was recording, we would add some top end to it through the chain. It was called radius EQ because of the way a record works as it goes in. You actually lose top end as you go in. The problem was, and here's something that happened, CDs got a very bad rap in the beginning. I'm kind of jumping ahead on this one. CDs got a bad rap because when we were recording, we used to record to reel, the EQ of the vinyl. The CD didn't need the vinyl EQ with the extra high end. So they would, when the CD first came out, and this is true with any new format, it's the stepchild, if you want to call it, of the business, and they're like, oh, just make the CD out of the tapes that are there, and because they no one wanted to spend money on it. And so we would do that. Or I never liked doing that. I would always try not to, and they would sound pretty bad. The CDs, the original ones, because of having a sound that was made for another format. And I would say that was probably the first thing that gave the CD straight out of the gate its bad rap, you know. I mean, there were other things. It was new digital, and nobody knew how to really deal with it because it was a totally different animal. You didn't have compression from, and I don't want to go too technical because I know some of you guys might be technical, but some might not be as. But you didn't get the tape compression naturally that you got with analog, and with the CD, it just was what you put on it. You pretty much got, especially if you went to a higher sampling rate.
So it needed different treatment. Then.
Exactly. I was one, I mean, of course I'm going to say this. I'm sitting here with everyone. I was one of the guys who was the first ones who gave it different treatment. Yeah, I said that. No, but in some senses I was, because I was actually trying to make them sound better. I like new formats when they come out to see what they're about, you know. To me, formats are a new way of expressing the emotion of music. And it's all about the music. That's what everything is really about. It's not really about a format, because a format technically is a storage medium. So it's almost like you take a picture. A picture is a image of something that happened. This is image of something that we heard.
But you know that this is like religious to some people almost.
I know. So, you know, it was funny. I was on a panel once. It was a TV show, and this was in the past. It was when CDs were newer, and it was about the difference of vinyl and CD. And for some reason, they put me on the CD side. We were having a debate. And the only reason why I won the debate, well, I could have won the debate, but I didn't want to, because I love vinyl. I didn't want to say things, and plus it was for the FX channel or something like that, and you couldn't get technical. But I won the debate really because I said to the guy, because he was like, oh, but I'm going to go home, and I can't wait to get home and play this new vinyl I have. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go in my car and play it in 1 minute. And everyone's like, oh, yeah. You know, and see, nowadays, like I said, you know what? As you're talking, I'm just going to plug my headphones in and put it on here, and I'll be good. You go home and wait till you get home, and then your neighbors are going to tell you, turn that down, you know. But, yeah, that was like one of them little deciding factors. But, no, I love vinyl. The problem with the vinyl, and I guess it's a problem with a lot of things, is this turntable, and this is cool. I never saw one with a gold arm. It has to be set up right. You know, this should be balanced. You know, you see pictures, sometimes they have pennies on it. And we would take the acetate, which has no grooves, so it's like a pure lacquer thing, and put it on it. And if the needle shot this way, it shot that way, then you know the arm is in balance. And then that means that you're putting more weight on one channel than the other, so you're not hearing it right. There's so many things about that get very technical. That's why all these buttons are here, and you start spinning them. People are like, oh.
And the weight, right?
And the weights, yeah. So, but you have to get that right to extract the best out of that, and then also you have to get a good. This is a Shure. That's cool. It's not a V15, but it's all right. but you know, but see, then you get like, oh, okay, he's just bourgeois. You know, he's got to have that super cartridge in there, and then
it's already golden. You know, at least.
Yeah, I know. And then the DJs, of course, couldn't have those type of cartridges because they were.
No back-cueing.
Yeah, back-cueing, and the abuse of it, you know, you might drop it on the needle. And so theirs weren't as compliant as the high-end ones, because we actually had turntables with the Shure V15s on the lathe. We would actually be cutting the record and playing it back at the same time and A-B'ing them. And it was so close. And that was, and you know, it's funny, you would go into a store, and I never tell people what I do or or even what I know or who I am. I used to go on high.
Except for today.
Okay. No, yeah, but anyway, I just didn't do that because, I just want to hear what people say, and you want the salesman to tell you something, and then they would, and oh, this cartridge sucks, and I'm like, really, and yeah, you should hear it. It's like I'm like, okay, I've heard it. I don't say that, but it's like okay, and they try to sell you something, and it's like, well, what? We actually have the lathe that actually makes the record, and we're actually playing them back, and we pop different cartridges. You pull the head shell off. Try this one. Ooh, that don't sound right. Put another one in. Ooh, it don't sound right. You can see the frequency response of each one, and actually see what really sounds like the lathe, because that's what it is. Again, it's that picture. If you could get a picture to look as clear as possible, like a high def or something like that, without much artifacts, or a picture of sound to be as close to that studio performance, that's what the goal is, and that's what we're always looking for in all the gear, because then some guys get into the wires and the this and the that. It's so many little nuances, it could get crazy. You can't worry about it all, but, to some degrees you do.
Should we listen for a minute to some of the records you made back in the days? Because your name is also very much attached to like New York dance music and rap music in the 80s, right?
Sure, yeah.
So you want to pick one?
Oh, okay.
Or should I?
Let's see what you have there. You know what? Let's get that. I just picked this one up because this was, believe it or not, my first gold record. Well, it was the first gold record I was given. Okay, scratch that. No.
You have to explain that now.
Because the record company would be like, Herb, why'd you say that? No. I know all the people. No, it was the first one that I was given. A lot of times, back in the day, if you say that a record was gold and nobody wanted to necessarily admit it, because that means they had to pay more royalties. The funniest thing is I never thought when this came out that it would actually be as big as it was, but I knew it would be big, but you never know when you're listening to music how it's going to play out. You're like, okay, this song feels good, and then after you, I guess, pick enough of them, people realize, oh, he must really kind of know what's going to hit. Maybe I should have been in an A&R. Did
Maybe.
some of that.
But you did pretty well with mastering.
We did good with the mastering.
So this was Planet Rock by
Planet Rock by Soul Sonic Force. It was. I got the gold record for that, and it's one of the few gold records that I actually have that is actually the record. That's something else that people don't know. The gold records are made. They're really just the stampers or the mothers of records that are made, but they're not necessarily the actual record. If you were to break the gold record, why would you do that? But if you were to break the gold record and pull it out and play it, it's like, oh, that's not the right record. It's really bad when the label says 5 songs and it's 4, and you can see that, and it's like, oh, that really sucks. But most of the time they try to get that right. But this one is the real gold record that I have, and it's like I keep it out there because there's very few like that. It actually has. I used to put a stamp in there and a smiling face.
So to get a gold record as a mastering engineer, you have to make sure that your name also appears on the record, right, in the credits, because it's not common for every label, especially these days, to kind of point out the mastering engineer anymore. So
yeah, that's true.
How do you make sure that that happens? You developed a special technique also, right? In the dead wax.
We're talking about in the dead wax. Yeah, I used to always write something in there, and a lot of times the artist or the producer would ask me to write some more stuff. Crazy lines. And it's like,
for instance,
what does this say? Okay, so you're gonna make me have to get my old man glasses. You might write something like it's pumped, or it's this is. I would always try to come up with a crazy line. Like if it was Soul Sonic Force, Planet Rock, you might say it's rocking. It's just corny stuff. Actually, this record has my wife's name on it, and it also says it's a hit. So I guess, thank you. So yeah, I should have did A&R, and yeah, it says that. So I guess we kind of knew right when we were doing that it was a hit. But yeah, I have that, and I have the Herbie and Junior and the smiling face. But yeah, we always tried to write something a little unique, sometimes about the record. Then we used to get really crazy. It's kind of, and this is the thing about it, when you write on the first record that you actually cut, it appears on every record. You have,
It's also a great way to distinguish the original from a bootleg.
There you go. And also, because what sometimes happened back then, records would be sent like to Sony or something, and they would just make extra copies. And some guys would want to get the first one that maybe I cut personally, and you could tell that if I didn't stamp it or write something, that I didn't do it. And I had even learned how to, I can't even see this that good anymore, but I used to be able to write in it and then write extra big so that you would see it like in two grooves. But if you hit the groove itself, you just blew the record. So you have to write inside of the groove. So, you know, you had this little scribing tool, and you had this whole little system of not touching the record. Because that's the other thing. If you touch the record, if you accidentally spit on the record, if you blew on it, it went on every record. So the original record had to be perfect, you know. Almost like Clean Room. Not quite, but we tried to be as close to that as possible.
With white gloves?
No. but your mentality was that. They, you know, they would almost say that a mastering guy was, you know, excuse me, everyone, but anal, you know, because, but it's part of the course, because, like I said, see, like you can see, if you look at this record, there's space, the music stops about there, and there's space, because this is only like a 7-minute song, but if you went past there to the label, then the record would be finished, and if you went up 1 dB more in level, see, I'm trying to get this spot out of here. If you went up 1 dB more in level, you might run out of room. And that's why you had to make sure your room was perfectly aligned, everything was set up right, because if it wasn't, you could lose the record. And it's happened every day. So, and like I said, then you have to pay for it, and everyone's waiting for you, and the day's getting longer, and you're now in the 10th hour.
So you don't miss cutting records these days? You don't do it anymore, right?
No, I haven't done it in a couple of years. Do I miss it? Yes, I do. Sometimes and who knows, I might get back into it, because I hear that it's making a resurgence. You know, you say yes. Yeah, I definitely could get back into it. And you know what? It wouldn't be on the cost-effective thing, because it's not really about that. It's about coming back with something that is loved, you know, because it's not going to be really cost-effective. So that has to be kind of thought about in the whole chain of events, and everything nowadays is about being cost-effective, you know, and that's what almost killed the business, or did kill a business, if you want to say it's killed. I don't know if you do want to say that, but you know, it's been through so many things because of that, you know.
And would you recommend an artist to attend the mastering session, or better not, from your experiences?
That's a two-sided question. Yeah, okay, I would always say yes, but I would also always say no. And then I go back to that cost-effective thing. You know what? There's so many people that I know, and we could come in, and it would be great if they're there, because they could tell me exactly what they're looking for, and then we get to work, and we just get it done. But if someone comes in and they're going to spend a lot of time you know, because when you walk into a studio, here's the interesting thing. Technically, you don't know the room as an artist or maybe even a producer unless you work there a lot. So you might have in your head how you want something to sound, especially a mastering room. A mastering room is even a little different than a studio. And since you don't know the room unless you brought, like, say, 10 songs with you that you know really well, you're not going to understand what's going on there necessarily. So you'll make judgment calls that might not be right. And so you might not get exactly what you're looking for. So you're really leaving it up to the engineer anyway. But if they're there and they do know the room, hey, we'll have a party. It'd be great.
And,
you know.
and how do you deal with it if the artist attends the session and wants you to change some stuff that, speaking from your expertise, you would have to say that's not a good idea? Do you let him know, or do you?
Well, yeah,
think he's a customer? So
in my the way I normally work is I would let them know. I definitely would let them know, only because I would say that you, of course, everything's tactfully, and one of the best ways is to play other music for them, and then let them hear what they're either asking for too much of or too little of, and then they make the decision. And then even if they still want to go with that decision, the bottom line is their creation. I'm just the engineer trying to give them their picture. If they said they wanted to have it like where it says old, fine. If that's what they really want, I would say I wouldn't do that, and I could give you a whole bunch of reasons why I wouldn't do that. But if that's what they want, it's not my record, it's their record, and it's their picture that they have in their mind. So I would go with it, you know. Probably say don't put my name on it. No, no, I wouldn't say that. But no, I would definitely go with it because, again, it is their picture, it's their concept, it's their idea, it's their vision, and I'm just there to make it as with the best fidelity I can. You know, it's again, I would caution on what probably should be, just so that it was said and everyone's on the same page. And you know what normally happens? When that does happen, a lot of times they come back and they'll actually say, ooh, you were right. When they go back home, can we just get it? I'm like, sure. I didn't throw it out. You know, I have your way and the way that I think is better. We'll just go back to that. It's not even about that. I mean, I've been doing this too long, and I've listened to too many systems. And, you know, that was the other thing I always was in love with. I was in love with just hearing speakers, hearing systems. I would go to clubs. I used to go to the garage. Used to go to the loft. Used to go to this club, that club, the Studio 54, smaller clubs, just to hear music in them. And you get perspectives of things. And then the other thing is also going to concerts and hearing what they sound like. Hearing, you know, it's beautiful, hearing what an instrument sound like. My daughter plays flute and sax and sometimes piano. And it's like, okay, I just want to record you really quick. Okay? And no, don't record me. Okay, no, I'm going to record you really quick. And so I record it just to hear how it's coming back and just to get the idea of an instrument. And the more you put that in your head and teach yourself how things sound, the more you'll be able to make that picture again of how it should be. And then you can go and do the pump thing, you know, and
Your
make
thing.
it, that's my thing, and make it just a little bit bigger. And the reason why I say a little bit bigger, it's like, you know, nobody wants to see real life. You know, I got a little zit here and a little this there. So, you know, you Photoshop it a bit. And, you know, oh, this shirt's not orange enough. Okay, let's make it like really pretty orange. Like,
So you put makeup on records
you could
or
do
on
that. You
music.
could do that. You could do that, right? And you know, very lightly, you know, and that's happening in mixing too. I mean, it's a whole process. The whole process is to get it so that when someone hears something, it's an emotion. You know, and please, everyone, remember that your producers, your artists, your engineers. This is about an emotion. It's about a feeling of music. I think sometimes we get away from that. And the other thing, which I'll say, and this is what I remember I said, and I remembered it. I'm not that old. about the hard drive, so I spent $1,000 for a gig. The reason why I say that is because I always like to ask everyone, and this has something to do with mastering as far as I'm concerned. In the audience, how many people have like iPhones and iPods and whatever, iPads, whatever? Everyone, I'm sure, has something, even if it's not an Apple one. Now, I ask this question, and I guess you all guys are here for a reason. This is why I'll say it. How many of you guys have like MP3s on it that are like just regular MP3s? Okay, y'all need to throw them out. You know, and I say that only because you're training your ear to hear substandard. And it's almost like this phone has all WAV files on it, at least 1644.1. iTunes will open at 24. You can put it right in. I've done it many times. You can even put it on. It might not what they call dither down properly, but it'll be better than an MP3. And when people say space, I don't want to hear it. I said that reason why. I paid $1,000 for a gig. So when I have 32 gigs or you get 64, I don't want to hear that it costs $400 or $500. Buy the gigs and put good sounding files on it, because this is what we do. This is what we're listening to. The MP3 was made for a producer really to send a file to someone just to get an idea of what the mix is going. That was it. It was like, okay, I need to email this, because back in the day, no email will let you go past like 3 or 4 megs. You know, you couldn't put it in the email as an attachment. So it was like, okay, I'm gonna send you this quick thing of like the first minute of it. Tell me what you think of the mix. Am I kind of in the right direction? Oh, okay, cool. They put this farce over us. I never forget when the Apple computers, not dissing Apple, I love Apple, but and sometimes. They would say in iTunes, oh, you're changing your parameters from whatever, it would ship at like 128 or 190 or something like that, MP3s, and that's what they were saying. And they used to have a commercial on TV. You can go all around the country 3 times and never hear the same song twice. Well, you know what? Hear the same song 5 times. I don't care. But make the files at the best resolution you can. It's the only thing that matters. The only thing that matters is to get the file, just like Hollywood's trying to get the pictures as good as possible. The music, in my opinion, what has happened is we went back to worse than 8-track. We went back to worse than cassette in what we're listening to, because we have the technology to have full res and good sound, but everybody's listening to substandard. And it became the state of the art by like
it became a hit.
It became a hit, you know. And it's not necessary, you know, because like I said, until gigs go back to $1,000, then I'll take that back, you know. But then I'll say do them at least at 320, you know, or something like that. But yeah, that's my biggest concern with nowadays is when the CD goes away, unfortunately, because I talk to a lot of young kids who aren't in the business. It just, you know, just my kids' friends or something like that, and they're like, oh, MP3 is the greatest thing. And I'll just look at them like, oh, God. I say, come in the studio and listen to something. They're like, wow. And I'm like, it's the same song you have like that, like this. And they're like, wow. And it's like, I didn't know all them instruments were there. Yeah, no, you know. and it's like, okay. And, you know, we got to get them back to where they're really enjoying music and hearing everything. I'm not trying to say that we should be selling huge speakers like these, but that would be nice too. I'm not even in the speaker market. I don't sell speakers, so you know I could say this, and we should have amps and the rest of the stuff. You can have. I use the Bowers and Wilkins headphones. They sound really good. There's lots of good headphones out there. You can play this. It can sound really good personally. Get a good sound system so that you can hear your stuff. And that's what we grew up with. We grew up wanting to hear sound good, you know? And that's what mastering was about, trying to get it to sound good. I sometimes hear stuff in the studio, I'm like, no one's gonna hear this. It's amazing that nobody's gonna hear this. And unfortunately, when the CD goes away, that's right now the last full resolution format. there are other formats out there, but they kind of went away. There used to be the 5.1 and DVD-A and stuff like that, but I was the only guy in the aisles looking at that stuff. I remember going to Virgin before they closed, and it's like, ooh, here's a high res music. And you could drop a pin, and there was nobody in that aisle except me buying a few things. And I was like, okay, nobody cares. So what happens is the state of the art has dropped to the point where music is just whatever it sounds like. Apple's trying to make a better comeback with the mastered for iTunes, which I'm part of. It's a start. I will give them that. And maybe it'll take off. Maybe next thing it'll be full res files. Who knows?
But you also told me earlier that some of the records you did back in the day, you would go and remaster them today also.
I've done that.
Yeah.
I've done that.
So why is that? If that was
because now we have the capability of storage. Remember, it's just a storage device. When you put things in 24-bit at higher bit rates, you actually can store this with even more, if you want to call it fidelity, than we had then. Again, I'm a lover of vinyl, and I do love a lot about it, but vinyl has, as any format does, its own limitations. And one of them normally is the bass response that we can put on it, and that's because we can't fit it, you know. Whereas if you were listening to a file at its full resolution, you can get the bass response all the way down to wherever you want it. So now sometimes I put things up and I actually redo them, and they come out great, you know. But there's nothing to put them on. There's really no way to get it anywhere. It's like I could make a, you know, a AIF or WAV file and just play it, but it's not on like a format per se, you know.
And should we maybe, you brought some stuff in their untreated stages?
Yeah, well, what we have here is I have, and this just will give you an idea. Yeah, I want to give you back the record. It's a couple of songs that I'm going to play that are before mastering and after mastering. Most of them you'll notice are, of course, they're louder, but it's not really about that. It's also getting more sound out of it. And I'm just going to put a couple of them on, and it'll give you an idea of some of the stuff that you can get out of mastering, per se. I'm not going to play the whole pieces because I have them all on the full lengths, but it'll give you an idea. And what you'll notice on each song there might be something different because they're different types of material. Some of them are more explicit than others. And that's because of, and all of them, I will say, were recorded really well. But when you go to the mastering stage, we're doing it for the street. The funny thing about studios are some really great sounding rooms, but they're really not necessarily. Nobody has, and I would say this because you guys have it, nobody has Osbergers in their house, and nobody has big JBLs normally or the big Genelecs. So we have a tendency to listen to stuff, and so I listen to stuff on big speakers, and I listen on small speakers, and I even started now listening on headphones just to get a perspective of what's going on so that I can understand how the average person's going to hear it. And so in a studio, a lot of times we hear it and it's like, that's perfect. And then you come out of the studio and you take that mix and you go in your car and it's just kind of laying there. Everything's there and it's all in good spots, but it doesn't jump at you. And that's what we can get from mastering. So we'll just play a couple of things.
Let me help you. And is it also, you're also approaching each project differently then? Because yes. I know there are some mastering engineers out there who just put their pump on everything they get. So you...
Well, you know what's interesting about that? Yeah, I'm not, never would bring up names. But there's a lot of times that I take every record differently because I try to put myself in the genre of that music. If it's a ballad, I try to put myself in the genre of the ballad. If it's a dance record, same thing. And I find that sometimes because of economy of scale, if you want to call it that. I find that a lot of guys just kind of have this, I'm not going to say one EQ fits all, but one concept fits all. It's almost like, especially if they were all from the same type of studio, it's like, I'm just going to put this up and it's going to work and it sounds better than what came in and I'm good. I really sit there and I like, oh, quarter of a dB here, half a dB. Let's try this. Oh, I can hear that little air in the tweeter coming out. Oh, I can feel the bass. Now the bass went from here to just growling at me, and then I get happy with it. But it takes longer of listening to it. You gotta just really put yourself into it. So like if you're doing a jazz thing, you pretend you're in a jazz club. If you're doing dance, you get there and start dancing. And pretend you're at the club, whatever, just go with the flow of it.
And how important is it for you to actually like the material or enjoy it?
That's important.
So you like everything you get?
No, no. You know what? That's important, and it's important to like everything you got, but it doesn't work that way. And but again, then that's when I can go back to the engineer side. Is I'm just trying to make it sound right for them. So I don't have to necessarily like everything, but most things I do like because I like all sorts of different types of music. But sometimes things can get like, oh, this is like really wearing at me. So maybe I'll just do, if it's an album, do 2 songs and then take a break, and then do another 2 songs, take a break, or something like that. But I wouldn't say that that's the norm, because I just really. The reason I got into this business was because I liked music. It wasn't even, and I like gear. I love gear. Gear is like really cool, because it just does so many things.
So what is your...
Look, all them buttons. Like if they turn the lights down, you saw the buttons, you make them flash and stuff. And like that one's good. It just gets cool. It's like you have the studio there and all buttons flashing, and half of them don't do nothing, but they look cool. No, they all do something.
So that's how you pick your gear?
Yeah, it's like, oh, look at that.
If it looks like a Christmas tree.
It's got to light up. It's like, oh, look at that. And then you listen to it. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like, but then we all do that. I mean, come on. Why isn't Red Bull sitting there all lit up? I mean, they look cool, but see, they should have put some of the reds on the other side, because it's like a little off center. But
there are some reds in that. Fridge in the
but
middle.
it's like, and these lights are like killing the whole mood of the place. Make it dark and make it cool. Light a candle, little scents and stuff, and, and then everything's like cool. Then you listen to music, you just bobbing your head. And then you get in the whole flow of it, and then before you know it, you have a whole.
So that's how your mastering studio looks like.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Dark and scent sticks.
Oh yeah. My wife's always like, "When you turn up the lights, you're gonna go blind." She was right. It's like, yeah, you keep it light, and dark in there. Plus, the lights make it hot. It's like horrible. I know the camera needs that though, so they could see my hair that I didn't shave this morning. But yeah, you try to keep it like this whole vibe, and so that you get in the vibe, because that's the whole point. You want to get in the vibe of the music, and then it becomes this whole experience,
And what's your favorite pieces of gear for mastering, if you care to share that? That not necessarily is the flashy one.
I have a GML, it's George Massenburg EQ that I love. I love some Prison gear. I have some Apogee gear. I have some Sony gear, Sony Pro. A lot of different pieces. Focusrite. There's a lot of good pieces of gear. But for different songs, you use different things. So, you never know exactly what you're going to use, but the main thing is just getting it to sound good as you apply it. And then it's like, oh, no, I'm not getting it with that, so I jump to this, or I use both or something like that. I have an API that I love. It's like incredible, and I use Sonic Solutions for my digital workstation. I also have a Pro Tools system. But that I just really use for playback. Most people use it for a lot of different things, but I'm not mixing and recording really. Well, I have, but that's not what I'm doing most of the time. I just did a whole album mix a couple of months ago. It was live too, so it was really cool. Actually, it was a horror scene when it first came in, and I couldn't believe it was like, ooh, I've got like 36 channels of loud. It was, and it was like, okay, we got to make this really cool, and it was live, so you heard the voices over everything. So it's like sitting there and first getting everything to get rid of the voices and make the instruments sound good. But it was actually for a school thing, so I was really motivated because I wanted to. It was in a college thing, so I wanted everyone to sound good. It came out really good. If I say so myself, you know.
I believe that.
It really came out good, you know. When I heard it afterward, I was like, "Ooh, this sounds good," you know. And it was like because everything was there, and that's okay. The main thing is everything was there. You brought the bass up, got the bass flowing, got the saxes going, and everything. You know, do a little sonic stuff to it and stuff. And they really
So Herb Mix Powers is the next stage then.
no, no. I just do that occasionally, and I used to do that years ago, but no, I try to stay in one vein. You know, there's plenty of great mixes out there. You know.
And what did you bring for us?
Okay, well, I got a couple of songs here. I'm gonna start with. Let's start with a ballad. This is one ballad. Artist's name is Layla Hathaway. Actually, Layla Hathaway is the daughter of Donny Hathaway. And it's just one of the songs, and it just gives you the before, which will be first mastering, then after mastering. And like I said, I really want to emphasize, everything sounds really good before mastering too, but it just needs that flavor, that pump. Herbie. No, and he said, I didn't say that. Y'all can erase that. Yeah, the first one. So anyway, and that one, like the reason why I said that was I just kept hearing those horns. I was like, I gotta bring these out. So it was like on every stab, you just wanted them to like jump at you. So you know, you do whatever you can do to make that come alive, and you hope that the artist likes it. And they did. They did. It was like, wow.
The artist is Cool and the Gang. Right?
Yeah, that was that last one's Cool and the Gang, who's been around for many years. They actually came out with a new album a couple of years ago, and their horn. That's one of the things that they do: bass and horns.
And have there been certain artists you've like developed a relationship with over the years? They always ask for you. You always mastered their stuff, and
yes. Actually, that's kind of how you get a, I guess you call it reputation or resume, if you want to call it. Most of the time when you work with them the first time, you get to know them, they get to know you. And I'd say by the third or fourth time, it's cool, but it's also kind of sad. You don't see them anymore as far as they don't come in anymore because I'll just send it to her.
Yeah, but that's a sign of trust.
Yes, and that's why I said it's cool, but it's not, because then you don't have the session. Because like I said, I do like sessions too, because you can have some fun with people and just hanging out.
And by then they also know how you prefer your pre-master, right?
Right.
How do you prefer your pre-masters to be?
Clean. No, just to be as well as they can do it. And nowadays I always say don't over level things, because then I don't have any headroom to work with. And
so over level is when the file looks like a brick.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Some people call it brick walling. Some people call it, super L2ing, whatever you want to call it. But when it's got too much, because in all actuality, a mastering studio can do it better if you're going to do it anyway, because they normally have. And I'm in no diss to anybody, but I'm really talking about a real studio that's really got a lot of gear, because if you're just running in a computer, I'm not saying you can't do a good job. You can still do a good job, but I'm an analog guy, so I kind of always go with analog. I go from digital to analog all the time with every song, then go back to digital. I could go straight digital, but I don't know. I always hear it a little bit, you know. So I like that warmth of analog, that vibe that some analog gear has. Plus, I paid a lot of money for the gear, so I want to use it and I want to see the lights, you know. So you know, it's almost like you know, because you can get a plug-in of something. You know, I'm not going to even have this discussion of plug-in versus analog because I don't know them that well. I've heard some, but I like my gear that I have. Like I know there's API plugins, but I like the way the API sounds. I even like the way the API sounds when it's kind of acting up. You know, because a plugin will never do that. A plugin, you'll never like get this little noise. Like I called API, I'm like, why do I get a little noise, a little more on the left channel? Right? Oh, that's normal. Oh, okay, cool. You know, that gives you the feel. Yeah, you're right. Well, I wonder if that's right. But anyway, that's what analog does. It's got its faults. It's got its color. It's got its vibe. So you might not want that on a classical song, or maybe you do. But you know, you kind of pick and choose where you're going to use stuff. You know, but yeah. Whereas, I guess they can kind of if they wanted to make a plug-in with that, they could put noise in it. It's just never the same. It's like, okay, we put noise in this plugin to make it sound like the analog. Like I've seen some plugins that's supposed to be like tape compression. They never sound like tape compression. Because then it's like, what tape? Was it 3M? Was it Ampex? Was it Grandmaster Ampex? Was it this? And then you got to get into all that, you know. Maybe they even have a switch for that on them. I don't know.
Do you still have to master from tape?
I still have my Studer, but actually, that was the Cool and Gang was one of the last things that came in. That and yeah, a John Legend, but yeah, not much. I don't think I've turned on the machine in years now. You know, beautiful machine though.
Yeah, that's how it goes with new formats.
Yes.
And should we open it up maybe for some questions from?
Sure. I even put
guys?
my reel up on Facebook.
For sale or just for show?
No, just to show it up there because most people are like, what's that? It's funny. I went to a Sam Mass store. And, you know, it was, I almost got, you know, because sometimes you say something, you don't know which way it's going to go. And I almost got mad at the salesman, but I'm like, I'm not going to get mad at him when he doesn't know. I'm like, y'all got like tape head cleaner? And he said, what? I said, tape head cleaner. I got to clean my heads on my tape machine. Dude, that's so ancient. We got Pro Tools. Okay, I'm going to smack him upside his head in a second. I have Pro Tools, I have this, and I have a tape machine, and I got tape, and shut up. But anyway, but
where did you get the cleaner then? In that shop?
I just ordered some.
Online?
Yeah. You get everything online. You go in the store. It's sad because I used to love going to stores to get everything. You go in the store now, you can't find anything. I understand that stores can't stock everything that everyone wants. So, Amazon, this, whatever, just find it. Just tape head cleaner. Bing or Google, that have the Bing commercials. Sometimes it's pretty cool, But yeah, quick.
Yeah. Any questions for Mr. Powers? There's the first one.
Hi, thanks for being here. You were talking about the mastered for iTunes, and do you think it's going to take a few years, I guess, but it will help to end the loudness war?
I say that again.
Do you think the mastered for iTunes stuff is going to help to end the loudness war?
Do I think it will?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't talk about the loudness war. Maybe.
Oh, we could talk about that. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think that that's going to be the answer. Here's a funny thing about, and I'm sure everyone in here probably has high speed. there's a lot of people in this country that don't have high speed, like my mom. And I'm always like, you got to get high speed internet. She's got this slow speed. And I go to her house and getting one song takes 2 hours and it's only 40 megs. And, you know, I go home and I'm like, look, Mom, I go home and they could do it in 30 seconds. And I'm like, Mom, please. Okay, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to get it for her. But that happens a lot. And the bigger the files get, you know, as far as people downloading them, I think it's coming on board, but I don't know if that's going to do it. And there's a lot of people that probably still want to get music elsewhere. Because okay, if iTunes is going to do that, I'm sure Amazon's going to have something competing. And I'm sure whatever other services there is going to have something competing. And right now, it seems like everyone just, you know, does the Pandora or something like that, you know. There's so many sites where you can hear music, you know, Spotify, Pandora, and stuff. I don't know what's going to happen because I can't be in the mind of the end user.
Okay, it was more about the, like I work in the mastering studio, so like for this process, when you listen through iTunes, like stuff were really loud at the beginning, like the end like sounded like with less volume than a track we were mastered like with more dynamic.
Right. Well, yeah, because if you're saying that, I think you're saying that because they don't want any overs.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They gave you this applet, and you also got to do this quick test on every song to make sure that you have no overs. It's doable, but you have to reduce the volume, and there's ways of getting around that to reduce the volume so that it works out pretty good. But I really is not still thinking that that's really the issue. I think what the issue is that the file system that they're turning it into, they're still doing the AAC is still doing a heavy compression of the file. That when I hear it compared to the original 24-bit. It still doesn't, it loses some things. And, you know, that's, and again, I just say, why do we have to lose? That's my thing. At some point, we got to have it put out there full, you know.
And last thing, you were talking about space for the computer. You have any opinion about the SSD?
About the what?
SSD. The new hard drives were not hard
solid
actually.
State?
Yeah.
They're fast. They're fast. They're expensive.
Yeah.
I don't use them. I have one, but I don't use them for my music. I just use high speed, you know, 7,200 RPM and higher, you know, 2 terabytes. I got a couple of them in my top Mac tower. And, you know, fill them up, you know, copy them to another external and go back at it. To me, it's not, I don't think that it's going to, you know, listen, I'm not a computer genius, so I don't want to, I could say something that someone could smack, that was wrong, Herb, how could you say that? Maybe they could help the sound, I don't know, but I haven't had a sonic problem with what I'm using now, so I can't say that it's going to be better or not. They are reliable, it seems to be, and they are so fast. So, you know, your stuff boots up quick and things happen really quick. That's where I'm impressed with the most with them, you know. But I don't really see where the cost of that will, because I don't even think they've gotten up to way into the gigs yet. I guess maybe they have. Actually, they have. You should see the price on that. I was on I think it was Western Digital site. They got this pro side. You got to do a lot of clicks and get into it. And they don't even sell it unless you're like a dealer. And they call it some super name. It's like supersonic, super duper, solid state, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, call for price. Whenever it's like no price listed, you know you're in trouble. You know, it's like, and they guarantee, oh, that's the other thing. They guarantee that it'll last longer than I'll be alive.
Thank you.
No problem. Oh, you wanted to ask about?
The loudness war before
The loudness
another
war.
question?
Before we'll grab another question in a second. The loudness war. That's an interesting thing. I was part of one of the guys. I think that's how I got the name Pump. Sort of. I was in the loudness wars. The funniest thing about it was the loudness wars were started for the vinyl, and I had one of the best vinyl cutting system for squeezing the most space in a disc. There were like 3 different systems, but I had tweaked mines, and the guy who actually built it came in and tweaked it even more. So I was able to get a lot of level on my discs. Plus, there's a lot about vinyl cutting that's a lot of people don't know. The cutter head is actually a small speaker, and it's actually scribing the analog signal into the disc. So here's just a thought, if you can give that cutter head lots of amplifier power, it's like giving a speaker a lot of amplifier power. You don't clip, technically, and you get extra headroom. And we modified the amps on our cutting system with these big power amps that were for clubs. And so, we were able to just put all sorts of sounds on the disc. But that's a lot of work. But the loudness wars came because everyone just wanted their record to sound louder than the last record. So and then it became a real problem because if you did Layla this year and then 2 years from now she does the next, can I get it louder, Herb? Okay. And then the next one, 2 years, can I get it louder? And then, okay, we ran out there's nothing to go louder at. Where we passed that peak maybe 10 years ago. So now, to get more level, we have to, when it's a give or take. So in order to get more level, you got to take from something else or accept something else, more distortion. And nowadays I'm at the point where we're at the level that we can be. If you want it louder, that's where I really will say to somebody, listen, I can make it louder, but if you want it louder, I can't guarantee it's not going to distort. So you're going to have to live with that if that's what you're looking for. And I've heard so many records that even come in and it just distorted. It's got this crunch and then it's like, wow, yeah, going somewhere else, So what I guess I'm saying is that we're already past the peak years ago. There's nothing more that we can get out of it unless some new technology comes out that I don't know what it is yet. I don't think it's even the solid state drives. But who knows? I don't know what it's going to be, but I don't see how we're going to get more level out of it. And everything's loud enough. And you know what? And I think you have more than one here. I always tell people there's always a volume control, even on your phone. So what's the point?
So the war is over.
No, I just think that it's been lost or won, so however you want to.
Depend on the side you are on.
Right. Because some people still want to be louder, but it's like they're not really accomplishing anything. They're actually detracting from their sound, at this point.
And there's another one.
Yeah, I got a couple questions for you, and thanks for being here, first off. And in a proper club setting, you've talked about how much you love 24-bit wave and how much you really think it's like, or that we can achieve the highest quality. But there's something about playing a record, because even when I'll play a 24-bit wave on a CD in a club, and then I'll switch over to a record that hasn't been beaten with, the anti-skating done perfectly and everything, and there's just something about it that just fattens the room up, and that's against like a 24-bit wave or a really high-quality AIF file. So if it was up to you, what would you rather, for your personal taste, would you rather have a high-quality wave or would you rather have a nicely pressed record? Desert island situation.
Well, okay, I'm going to just say this. For the record, I would give it to the record because that's what I learned how to spin on. I never spun with files. I don't even own one of them. I got to get one of them. They're pretty cool, and I like the blinking lights. But, and I have quite a few CD players. But I learned I still have my 1200s, and I got a couple other turntables. I learned on records, so that's kind of all I know. There's probably reasons for that. And again, I'm not knocking any one format, and I never would, because they both are different, but I would probably say it's probably the fatness of the cartridge and the RIAA curve built into certain things that, and every manufacturer is different, because some manufacturers, if they're like, if you had the old Bozak mixers and stuff like that, they were built for turntables. And then if you have some of the newer ones, they don't put as good circuits in certain things. So I think it's not really a true A/B comparison. And see, that's where my thing's coming from. Is it a true A/B comparison of this file versus this record? Can you put this record directly into it and A/B it and hear everything that you hear on the record? And that's where, where I'm going to come up. Now, whether it's happening in a club, probably not, because they probably have a smoother curve for the record. And, that happens. So, you're going to like the record better. And, but then, of course, you have that. Let's have that conversation like I did on the thing. You have that thing of, you did mention something that is hard to find, and that's the perfect record. Unfortunately, so. But again, still, there's a charm to hearing the pops and ticks. Look how many we put to the files. You start a file nowadays, they put pops and ticks on it because they want to hear that vibe. It's a vibe thing, so. I just say go with whichever one you like best. I would still do the record because that's what I know, and I just like the tactical feel of it. I like the size of it, And I know a lot of guys do both, so whatever works,
And also, I wanted to ask you, what's the youngest person you've seen cutting records? Because I've been talking to a lot of people about working lathes and stuff, and they seem to be kind of concerned that it's a dying art form and that a lot of younger people don't know how to do it or master for it. And most of the people that I have mastering vinyl for my label are older, but they've been doing disco records and all this stuff. So I haven't really run into too many younger people. So it's people are kind of starting to worry about having to operate the machinery and passing it down onto people, and people not wanting to even really care about it. So
you're asking me what's the youngest person?
Yeah, easy question. What's the youngest person you've seen cutting records?
Ooh, good question.
Recently.
Ricardo. No. I don't really know. I mean, there's a few younger guys out there, but see, my kids always say, "You said he was young, and you said he was, a certain age," and I'm like, "Oh, I'm old." So it's perspective. To me, a young guy is 30. Okay, that's bad. But yeah. So. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know of too many myself. I just know of the older guys because that's the group that I was with. I'm sure there are.
I think that's most of them, though.
Really, is it? You probably would know that more better than I have, better than I do. I think it should be learned. It's it's a great art form, and it doesn't seem to be fully going away. So, and I'm glad it's not. So, I guess I'll teach some people if they get a lathe.
I'm into that. Yeah. Thank you.
No problem.
One more there.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello.
Another thing I was thinking about, you must have seen a lot of track listings in your time, like coming in. I wanted to hear, in your mind, has there been a change? Do you see a change in the way people structure albums from years back up until now? And if so, what do you think lies in that change of perspective?
Well, yeah. On the vinyl side, they used to call it load up the album with the hits at the front. So the first song on side A would be, first two songs would be the hits, and then it would slowly be not the hits, if you want to call it that, or the B-sides and stuff like that. So there were, and we still almost, no, we don't really, My wife always asks, "What's the track list?" Because she's my studio manager. What's the track list? And a lot of times you get, "Huh?" Not all the time, but sometimes you get that. And nowadays, I don't think it's that because with the CD and with iTunes, you're buying by song. So really, even if it's a full album, and even if it isn't the right track list that the CD followed, people I like song 3, and I'm only buying 3 and 5. And that's why they always have space in it. That's also, I'm getting off your subject a little bit, but I love putting albums together in tempo, crossfades with, you know, and especially if it's a dance record or something like that, or even if it's just a mood record, ballads where a ballad goes and crosses into the other one. You get this whole thing. And a lot of times you can't have that because it wouldn't work on the uploads.
No.
And you lose the whole perspective. Years ago, after we were finished mastering, you're right. We sat there for a long time trying to figure out, and we had many different sequences put together of what flowed better. But I guess that still goes on to some degree. And some people are into it and others aren't, you know. I would say most of the guys I work with are still into it, you know, because they do have their ideas.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, that's another question, I guess. You just brought it up yourself. I wanted to ask you if you have a philosophy on transitions. I guess what you're saying is you like making, like putting effort in transitions.
Oh, yeah. I love that. To me, that's part of the mastering process. It's part of the process. It's not like well, I shouldn't say it's not important because there's some albums that we actually took like little pieces and they didn't mean anything by themselves, but you put it between something and all of a sudden you get this whole flow going. Yeah, I think that how something's put together is how you can sit there and listen to it, especially like if you're in a car and you're just driving along and it's like, wow, that flew right nice into that one. Ooh, yeah. And like something might be a ballad and then it goes up tempo at the right point, then you have another up tempo and then it brings you down. It gives you this emotional high and lows and stuff like that, like a good book.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
It's a bit of a simple question, and thank you for coming.
Oh, you're welcome.
I meant to ask the other like mastering guy, but has there ever been a time where you were brought a track and it like over? I'm serious.
No, let's hear it. This is gonna be good.
No, I mean it's relatively simple. I mean, has there ever been a time where you were brought a track and all the pieces and you listened to it as a whole and it just like overwhelmed you emotionally? I mean.
Yeah, that has happened.
What track?
Actually, one of the tracks, one of the things that did that years ago to me was one of Sade's songs, a couple of her songs. There's been quite a few, and it's different emotions, of course. You know, some emotions are like, wow, that was sad. When I did Luther Vandross's Dance with My Father, I had heard a whole story on that, and you know, from them before he passed, and it was like, wow, that's sad, you know. And it just gets into you as you're doing it, you know, because then you hear the whole story of why it was written. I mean, I've had many different tracks that done that from all different artists, you know. There's even some dance track, house music and stuff like that. The emotional content is so intensive that it's like, wow, this is like just you feel the hairs on your back stand up and stuff like that. And I've also had some tracks that they're so like, and I don't even know necessarily what they always are about, but they seem sad, you know. And maybe it's just me. I'm very in tune with things like that, you know. So yeah, that's a definite. I almost think if a track doesn't involve an emotion of some sort, it's not necessarily right, you know. And I'm not saying it has to be good, bad, or anything, but it should have an emotion to it, you know, of something, you know. You know, like that one of the tracks I play. Every time I hear it with the way it's in, I just feel like you're on an island somewhere. You know, it's just like chilling. You know, give me a little pina colada or something.
That was Emily King, right? The
Yeah.
second one.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know that song. That's what I was thinking about.
Oops.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, man.
I just made a mess.
One more.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah, I was wondering if you ever got involved in doing kind of audiophile pressings of records back in the day. Like, I've got records where they'd release a new version where it's like half speed mastered and like all these fancy things done to it. And I've actually had situations where I bought like 2 or 3 copies of a record and they all sound slightly different. And there'd be like an audiophile one that was maybe supposed to be the best, but I don't know. And I'd wondered if you've ever worked in that realm at all.
I did half speed mastering. Yeah, we got into that. It didn't last long. And I shouldn't say that because I think they probably still have them now, and that's probably what's left, which is funny. It's probably one of the biggest genres of what's left now. But yeah, we got into half speed mastering. That was really interesting because you had to actually make everything at half the speed, including the lathe, and then when you played it back, you were able to actually pack more information in it. And again, that goes because of the you said the word when we were talking. It's I wouldn't say that, it's just the way a lathe is. A lathe doesn't like extreme top end. It can play it, but it can't play it loud. So if you half it, say if you have something at 15K, now it's at 7, okay, and it could take that better, or 7.5, 8. So when you get into that, you actually could pack more information in the disc. But talk about not being cost effective and blowing the sides. Ooh, you would wind up spending all day doing one record, and the record companies did not appreciate that very much.
I think those records, ones I've got, sound absolutely amazing. I mean,
some of them really do. We also had DMM, which is direct metal mastering. You're actually not cutting on the black acetate. You're cutting on the actual master that it cuts out some of the processing, and you're actually cutting on copper. And the lathe looks incredible. The copper is just a thin sheet. If you grabbed it with your hands, you cut your hands up because it's like razor blades, because you're actually cutting right into the metal. And that actually sounded a little bright, but it did sound cleaner. So yeah, I've delved into quite a few of those.
Are there any records you think are the greatest like pressings that you know of? Like, are they like records that are like the pinnacle for you that you feel like you kind of have on a pedestal? Like I've got records that friends come to my house and I'm like, this is the best sounding records I know that I'd want to play them. They're things like that you'd give as an example to people.
You know what my problem is? I don't know particularly because I know it's going to sound weird. When I really like the record, I cut myself a copy. Really bad. But I used to buy my own boxes of acetates, and I would cut myself a copy and keep it. And then I never listened to the store-bought one. Because, and I'm not trying to say too much here, but I think I said too much. Because the store-bought one, if you heard an acetate, oh my God, you have, because you said a red company. You know what I'm talking about. They sound, you can't play them that often though, but the first couple of plays, there's not a noise. You just put the needle down, it's like put a CD on. Just pure music. There's no noise, no nothing. And I would take that and just archive that. And that's what I heard. And then when I would always get the street one, you would see the needle going like this, and it would be a little off, and it's like, I hear wow and flutter and all this. It's not the same record. Then you try to get a good pressing, and sometimes you would, and sometimes you wouldn't. You can't go out and run by 10 and say, 2 are good out of the 10. So you'd be broke. So I would just, if I really like something, I would just have the acetate. I still do sometimes.
Nice.
Yeah,
I think you're the most serious audiophile I've ever met at that point. Like, that's the
I really am. It's a sickness. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, I'm going to buy a lathe. Yeah, that's the only way.
No, it's like drugs, you know. It's like oh, a little more. Oh, how much was that? Oh my God! And you'll faint. You know, it's like it's not cool.
You're talking about cutting direct to the metal. What about the actual plant where it's getting pressed? Because you're talking about skipping a step. But sometimes when we get records pressed at one place, they sound way better than at another plant. Like the actual plant,
Right,
where they're pressing it.
right. Well, not all the plants took them. I don't believe. And my knowledge of the plants is not that great. I knew some of the guys that worked there, but I only went to one once, and it was like, oh, okay, you know. There was different plants, you know, that some I was always happy when they were the ones doing it, and some I was not quite so happy when they were the ones doing it. I will not mention names on that one, but yeah, that's one of the concepts of the vinyl record. You know, you go to some plants and you knew you always got, and they really cared. You got a good vinyl record out of them, and others not so much sometimes. But and it wasn't our decision really. It really became the decision of the producer / record company, you know, where they wanted to use. So, you know, I almost felt like out of that loop to a degree, you know. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you.
A little bit.
Any more? If not, thank you very much for being here. And a big round of applause for Mr. Herb Pump Powers.
Thank you.